Hello! This video is going to explain the science and tricks to collecting and editing audio for a radio piece. Radio segments tend to consist of a couple things: an interview with a subject, a voiceover from whomever is making the piece, and then smaller things like natural sound bites or music. These have to be recorded well and edited well to create a quality radio segment. To start, one of the most basic audio tools is the amplifier. As we know, amplifiers change the intensity or volume of a sound wave. Keeping track of intensity levels within radio pieces is important to make sure the audio sounds good. If it's too loud, the audio track can start clipping and become distorted. This is because amplifiers all have a maximum limit of amplifying. If it's amplified past that point, then the audio gets warped beyond negligence. This tends to not be an issue if the gain is not very large. In post-production for radio segments, the soundbite that has been recorded is what you have to work with. If it was recorded too low, for example, an amplifier can increase the intensity and make it sound louder, but this comes at a price. You see, amplifying will always change the quality of the audio track regardless of how much the gain is. It's just that for a certain amount of gain, this is negligible. But if the recording truly was recorded too low, then amplifying it until it can be heard is dangerous, as it could result in hearing background noise from the recording or negative feedback. Feedback usually sounds like a low hum or hiss and is something that comes from the mic. It's something many mics do and is caused by the type of mic or power source, but isn't that noticeable in the original recording because it's too low. However, once amplified, it becomes very clear. This is something that is generally easy to combat and relies on a good original recording. Amplitude is something that can be controlled on any recorder found in the industry, so getting a good audio level simply requires the radio journalist to test their mic, wear quality headphones, and set the volume to what sounds right. If the first recording is not of good quality, there really isn't any way to save it, so recording at a good volume the first time tends to be vital in the radio industry, because a bad audio recording is hard to correct in post. Secondly, there are equalizers. These work by changing certain frequencies in an audio track. If, for example, an interview is being recorded but there's an obnoxious drone in the background, you could cut out that frequency just as long as it doesn't mess up what the interviewee is saying. This is done using filters: low pass, high pass, band pass, and notch pass filters. But what does that do from a more artistic view? Those different frequencies contribute to bass, middle, and treble, the different types of sounds on the audio spectrum. Now, while equalizers are not super commonly used in radio, they do still have higher relevance in different areas. They're used for live venues to alter sound based on how the space reacts to said frequencies. If an area reverberates bass too much, bass frequencies can be cut so it doesn't reverberate as much. Equalizing in post-production is useful too, because if a recording is too tinny, then it's possible to take away those high frequencies and make the recording sound better. Once again though, too much post-production audio editing will ruin the original audio track beyond recognition, so it's something to be used in moderation. If too many frequencies are cut, the recording will sound artificial and unrealistic, which is not what anyone in radio would want. Lastly, there are countless ways to modify the radio piece using an audio editing software. I personally use Adobe Audition, which has single-track editing and multi-track editing. Single-track editing is where things like amplifying and equalizing happen, along with much more. It allows me to cut the parts I don't like, make some parts louder or softer, and so on. I get to pick and choose what parts of the original recording I want to include, and is very important to creating the structure of the story. More specifically, however, it can take out tiny, annoying imperfections that would make the piece noticeably flawed. One cool trick is that sometimes you can get rid of places where the audio peaks without having to re-record. Audio peaking is when a certain sound or syllable is recorded louder than the rest and results in a bit of clipping or just a particularly harsh noise. The P sound is a perfect example. If you pop your P's in a recording, it sounds loud and can create feedback. Overall, not something you want in your radio piece. But you can go into the waveform, zoom into the sound wave, and cut the very middle part where the P is popped. You have to leave the beginning of the sound and the end so the popped part is gone, but the P sound is still there, just a little softer. Problem solved! This can work for other things too, like if someone stumbles over their words but it's a hard place to cut, cutting between sounds, if the sound is said twice, can also work. Multi-track editing is where you get to take all the different recordings that have been edited to what you want and put them together to form one coherent piece. This is the post-production version of mixing all the audio tracks together. This gives you the chance to structure the piece how you desire and layer the interviews with the nat sound and the voiceover. This is the final step in producing a radio piece. The The post-production process in radio includes small things like tweaking it to perfection and using amplifiers and equalizers, but it also helps create the entire structure to the story being produced. So, post-production and recording the audio for a piece are equally important and both have aspects of the concepts we learned this semester, but most importantly creates an enriching way to consume journalism.